Greetings, non-feminist men and women everywhere on planet Earth. Today is Monday, November 30, 2015. Welcome to episode number 73 of the Vanguard Report. This is where we push the frontier against feminism. We're not so big on men's rights and men's issues, although we are certainly sympathetic to those things. But here we talk about feminism because, well, somebody's got to just talk about feminism and focus on that particular topic as a specialization and develop the whole array of methods that we will need to move against this great enemy, this great social cancer, this thing which is pounding a wedge right down the middle of the human race, dividing the two biological halves of the species, which is sheer lunacy, the kind of thing that's bound to have deadly and disastrous consequences. That's feminism. Feminism is what tells us all about the dark side of human nature on the male side, but says next to nothing about the dark side of human nature on the female side. It's as if the dark feminine does not even exist in the feminist scheme of things, in the feminist worldview. And to try to proceed through life, through history, on the idea that the dark side of human nature does not exist on the female side, that is sheer lunacy. That is a recipe for disaster. It just won't end well. I guarantee it will not end well. And feminism has taken that tendency, which some people would call gynocentrism, has taken that tendency and pushed it into hyperdrive. And the situation is becoming wildly unbalanced, and something's going to crash and burn here. I mean, we got to do something about this feminism thing. Anyway, we deal with three questions here on the Vanguard Report. Number one, what is feminism? If we're going to talk about feminism, we probably ought to have an idea of what it is. Second question is, where do we stand? What is the present situation in terms of the battle? Third, what is to be done? In the light of our knowledge of what is feminism and where the situation currently stands in relation to feminism, we then turn to the third question, knowing or asking, what do we do next? Where do we go from here? That is the question, what is to be done? What is feminism? Where do we stand? And what is to be done? All right. The title of this episode number 73, is Storming the Enemy Citadel. As you will see, the enemy citadel is the world of post-secondary education, the university campus. That's enemy territory. That's their turf. Storming the enemy citadel. And my fellow host, Nick Redding, man of Canada, true son of the Alberta Prairie, is not with me today. And until further notice, he will not be co-hosting with me here on the Vanguard Report. His life got switched around. He's got scheduling issues. He is not able to make it in here during the customary Monday time slot. So we wish Nick well in all of his endeavors, everything he's doing. He might come back again. Things could change, and he might be able to come back and co-host this show with me. But until further notice, no Nick. Until further notice, it's just me, Fiedelbogen. And I may bring some people in here from time to time. Who knows? But for episode number 73, it's just me flying solo with my little man behind the curtain, James Huff, pulling the ropes and pulling the levers and making the gears run smoothly. James, you rock our world here at the Vanguard Report. So, first up, as I promised, on episode number 72, I said I was going to give you the link, the address to Cora Newbold's Cafe Press account on the internet. Cora is the main mover and shaker behind Men's Rights Quincy in Quincy, Illinois. That's just men's rights group. And Cora is in the earlier stages of that, going through the predictable cycle. In the early stages, things start off kind of slow. You just got a few people involved, not a huge amount of interest. But then at some point in the cycle, in the curve, it starts to accelerate, it starts to pick up. We've seen this before, we've gone down this road before, we know what to expect. I think Cora will be doing impressive things there in Quincy in the days and months and years ahead. Anyway, Cora has got her online store, Cafe Press, where she sells various merchandise emblazoned with wit and wisdom of a, shall we say, counter-feminist nature. One of the big things featured on there is the universal non-feminist banner or logo, the one that says non-feminist in dramatic black and white. Maybe some of you have seen it before. All kinds of merchandise, paraphernalia, call it what you will, including t-shirts, black t-shirts with the non-feminist banner printed on. Very dramatic, really cool looking. Coffee mugs with the non-feminist banner on there. Computer cases with the non-feminist banner. Tote bags, bumper stickers, wine glasses, of all things, with non-feminist printed or embossed or whatever they call it on the glass. Key chains, key rings, or key fobs, or whatever they call those things. It's got non-feminist on. All kinds of stuff there with non-feminist printed on it. So that should be cue number one in the cue list. For some time now, we've been having problems with the links not working. People click on the links and they go to some kind of a dead end on the internet. We don't know why this is, but I'm going to help you out a little bit here. This is relatively simple. If the link doesn't work for you, well, I'm going to feed it to you right now. It is Cafe Press, one word, cafepress.com/men's rights market. Men's rights market, all one word, lowercase, men's rights market /126609551. That's cafepress.com/men's rights market /126609551. If you missed that, well, just go back, replay the thing in the video, and you can get it if you're interested in going there and looking at all the good stuff that's available in Cora Newbold's Cafe Press online store. All right, I did that. Now, interesting thing just come up recently with CAFE, the Canadian Association for Equality. They have an impending legal action against the police department or some police department or maybe a number of police departments in Canada who go out on domestic violence calls and ignore violence against men, don't listen to men who are being violated by women, laugh at them, in some cases arrest them, even with blood running down their face. Cafe is thinking about bringing a lawsuit against police departments who behave that way. And unfortunately, I didn't get this in the links in time. This just came up kind of sudden, but it was just so great I had to talk about it. So I'm going to go there and look at the web page and share, because there's a little bit of a short article that goes along with this. Greetings. Cafe is gearing up for legal action against police agencies that fail men and children. Are you tired of hearing about police ridiculing male victims of violence or arresting innocent men while leaving children with dangerous female aggressors? So are we. And there's a donate button here so you can help them out. And a banner celebrating amazing first year Canadian Center for Men and Families. That's a different organization. It tells you where to go there in, I think it's in Toronto. And here are some quotations from various men who have had these sorts of bad experiences with the police. When the police showed up, I was bleeding from my forehead and had bruises on my chest. The police kicked me out and left my kids with their abusive mother. The police didn't even talk to my witnesses who saw her beat me many times. Police and social services were ready to remove the male victim from the home and leave the children in the care of the female perpetrator. I was punched, bitten, scratched, as well as verbally and mentally abused. I called the police when assaulted, but they laughed at me and did nothing. These are the stories I hear every day at the Canadian Center for Men and Families. Well, enough is enough. Cafe is working to build a legal case against police and social service agencies who ignore male victims, refusing to grant men equal access to justice and arrest innocent men, leaving children in the hands of violent women. Ah, that old dark feminine, toxic femininity. Gotta love it. Of course it doesn't exist. Any feminist will tell you that there's no such thing as toxic femininity. Oh well, maybe there is, but when it does happen, it's different somehow because women are not oppressed, and under patriarchy, it doesn't matter somehow when women are toxic and violent or anything. It's okay because patriarchy. Want to help abused men and protect defenseless children? Support legal action. Make a tax deductible donation or sign up for monthly giving. And that's it. And then there's a donate button and a sign off and a contact address and a telephone number. And it's signed by Justin Trottier, a name we've heard before. Executive Director, Canadian Center for Men and Families, CEO, Canadian Association for Equality. So that's interesting. They're going to go after the feminist police departments. Yes, I said feminist. They are in the grip of feminism. They are in the grip of feminist ideological mindset, the feminist worldview. Either that or they're just afraid to go against it. But it's not good either way. I wish I had the address to give you. I'm going to try something here. I've never done this before, but here on the Google Hangouts, we have a tab, a place on the side, a chat bar, that is group chat. I'm going to put that in there, and there it is. If anybody is able to see that group chat, I just put the link into it. And if you're listening live, you'll be able to pick that up. If you catch this on the flip side after it's gone into the archives, and you're listening to it then unfortunately you will not be able to get this link. But it's there now in case anybody is listening now and has access to the group chat. Okay. Well, that's interesting news. I mean, they're going after the power structure, the institutional power structure, helping in their own small but very significant way to dismantle the structural oppression of males. This is something that ought to interest us. Now, maybe I sound like some kind of a men's rights person when I say the structural oppression of males. No, I'm just a scientific observer of the scene. I'm looking at the world and saying it as I see it, or telling it like it is, really, because it is happening. It ought to concern us because, what's bad for half of the human race is going to have repercussions for the other half as well. And I would especially think that if you belong to that other half, this would concern you. If it doesn't concern you now, it's going to concern you somewhere down the road. And extra points to you if you see the problem now ahead of the crowd and get in first. So, next up on the show, I'm going to talk about a few things. Let's talk about the hegemonic nature of feminism in the world today. The hegemonic nature of feminism. Feminism has the hegemony in our society today on many different levels. Now, hegemony is what some people would call a big word. And if you want to reach the middle mass, you must go easy on words like that. That's what I always hear. So let's pause and explain this. Hegemony is defined as the processes by which dominant culture maintains its dominant position. Examples would be using institutions to formalize power, using a bureaucracy to make power seem abstract and depersonalized and mystified, instilling the population with the ideals of the hegemonic group through education, advertising, publication, etc., using police and military personnel to subdue opposition. These are all forms of hegemony. Hegemony applies to every facet of life, and feminism is pretty close to being hegemonic, if it isn't there already. Is feminism the dominant culture? Yes, it is. You know the drill. Show me who you are forbidden to criticize, and I will show you who rules you. Feminism is quite simply the ruling cultural force in our lives. It dominates the intellectual airwaves, and you hardly dare to raise your voice against it unless you are a relatively obscure person in a corner somewhere. It is no exaggeration to say that feminism exercises a moral reign of terror over our lives. Of course, they will deny this and scoff at this because their scam depends on keeping up the fiction of being a victim or a beleaguered underdog battling the quote unquote patriarchy. It's quite a paradoxical position they're in, but it's working out pretty well for them. There's a sucker born every minute, and by God, plenty of suckers are sucking it up with never a second thought. All right, so feminism is hegemonic. It's in our laws, it's in our institutions, it's in our government, it's in our popular media, it's in our civil society, it's in the fabric of our lives, the fabric of our language, the very fabric of our thoughts, when you drill that far. Feminist domination of life is seen on a global scale in many countries. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a simple observation of fact that anybody can make with sufficient study if they bother to do so. Rather than a conspiracy, Let us call it a confluence of operations or a moral confluence, whatever. It's a confluence of factors. Now, as you know, we don't preach men's rights around here. We have nothing against the men's rights concept, mind you, but still, it's not our gig. For reasons we have gone over plenty of times, we prefer to focus on the feminist problem in a narrow political way. We define the paramount task in very simple terms: to disestablish the feminist worldview. Got that? To disestablish the feminist worldview. For if there is one thing that makes feminism hegemonic above anything else, it is that the feminist worldview is hegemonic. Feminism is the establishment, and the feminist worldview spreads over everything like a blanket of mental smog, a self-contained theory of the world used for living in the world, a mental model of reality, a holistic framework of ideas and attitudes which constrains the possibilities of thought like a spherical gravity field. Every establishment would like to make its worldview the official dyed-in-the-wool way of thinking for every last person everywhere. Some establishments succeed pretty well at this, others not so much. Well, feminism is one of the former. Feminism has succeeded pretty well. Indeed, it's a rare person nowadays who is not mentally tinged by the feminist worldview to some degree at least, and quite unaware of it, frankly, in most cases. To disestablish the feminist worldview means to challenge feminist hegemony at every point where it exercises control. For how is it possible for truth to emerge if feminism remains culturally hegemonic? The educational system is a vital organ in the feminist power structure, and if we are to disestablish the feminist worldview, it's an excellent place to start. Now, I'm thinking of college campuses in particular. Universities are formative institutions where young people, who frankly scarcely have a mind yet, are injected with ideas that will color their thinking for the rest of their lives. They come to college like empty vessels waiting to be filled with something. And not only color their thinking, but color the thinking of society as a whole. For post-secondary education is a site where present thought leaders work to instill the right thoughts into the thought leaders of tomorrow. College is where you go to be told what to think, to be filled up with the ideas that will sustain the hegemonic order of power in the world on the intellectual front. Now, maybe you think that's not what college ought to be. A lot of people think that's not what college ought to be. But nowadays, effectively, well, that's what it is. So it's small wonder that the university campus is such hotly contested ground. In a very real way, whoever controls the university campus controls the collective mind. The young minds are filled with the right thoughts. Those young minds graduate and they fan out into the world, into various places, and they rise into positions of power and influence. And the thoughts that have been instilled in them during their educational period trickles down and begins to influence the shape of the world in general. It affects policies, it affects decisions on every level. So, small wonder that the university campus is such hotly contested ground. Whoever controls what gets fed or shoveled into the hoppers of young minds controls the world, or a pretty big piece of it. Now, in recent episodes of the Vanguard report, we have talked about starting counter feminist groups in various settings across the cultural landscape, could be anywhere, in order to propagate counter feminist information, to spread the red dye, as we like to say. Remember, everything we do is just a form of working with information. That's all it is. That's all that all of it is. We're just working with information. But today, let's bring this down to earth a little bit more. College campuses are an obvious target for such action, such red dye campaigns. College campuses are sacred enemy territory. They are the crucible in which the collective mind is formed, as we said, and they are jealously guarded by the enemy who controls them. You can tell they've got a lot invested in keeping the university system under their control. Just look at the hysterical rioting that happens whenever a non-feminist influence of any kind tries to make its presence felt. This is the environment into which you will want to inject yourself. Now, all I can do is offer suggestions. So I'd like to sketch a few possibilities for general consideration here. We're just tossing ideas around. Let's say that you are a college student, because that's the most logical way you would get your entree into this world. If you're a college student, it's a lot easier that way. And you want to begin to create a non-feminist presence or a counter-feminist presence on your university campus. Well, you could start a group, but I practically guarantee that when you try that, you will not be given the official stamp of approval by the authorities on your university campus. When they find out what kind of a group you are and what you plan to be doing, I guarantee they will boot you the hell out of there. Good luck making yourself an official campus group or a campus club. I'm not saying it can't be done. If you're really brilliant, really ingenious, really creative, maybe you can fly below their radar. Maybe you can pull the wool over their eyes. Who knows what you can do? But I'm saying the odds are hugely stacked against you. But you want to begin to counteract the feminist propaganda on the university campus, to introduce the world to a different way of thinking, a different reality, a different worldview. Remember, you're trying to disestablish the feminist worldview, whereas there on the university campus, they are trying to establish it. They're already established there, and they are trying to maintain that establishment. They're trying to perpetuate that establishment, ideally forever. And you're trying to get in there and sabotage that, undermine that, and break that up in some way. You are there to be a pattern disruptor. They have a pattern. You've got to inject a different pattern into their pattern and begin to disassemble the internal logic of their pattern. You're a pattern disruptor. You're working with information. So they're not going to let you have an official club on campus. That doesn't mean that you cannot have a presence. That doesn't mean you cannot be an unofficial club on campus. Now, what are some of the ways you can do this? Well, first of all, you form your group. If it's just one person, maybe it's just you, well, that's a group of one. Ideally, you would have at least two people and maybe a few more than that. But you get together, and at some point, boiling this down to the very simplest terms, what you want to do is announce your presence, make your presence known. you want to make known to the campus community that there is a non-feminist element injected into the feminist soup. Because I guarantee just about every college campus out there is a feminist community. As Ashley Ingle said about the University of Toronto, this is a feminist community. Meaning, if you're not a feminist, you better keep your mouth shut. Okay? You want to inject your presence into that feminist community. They don't want outsiders invading their turf. They might as well hang up a sign at the gate which says, non-feminists, keep your mouth shut or keep moving. No, you can get by as a non-feminist as long as you make yourself invisible and don't speak up. Now, you don't need to be anti-feminist. I've gone over this plenty of times. Just not being a feminist in the long run throws a wrench in the feminist machinery just as surely, just as critically as actively opposing feminism. In fact, for various reasons that I've talked about, it could even be argued that taking a passive or neutral non-feminist stance as opposed to an anti-feminist stance could be even more effective. And so this is how I would do it. This is what I recommend. And what you end up doing is in your hands, but I'm going to say my say right now. You should set up your group as non-feminist rather than anti-feminist. You should not set up your group as a quote unquote men's rights group, or as they're saying now, a men's issues group. It's not men's anything. The subject of your discourse, the thing you're interested in, you want to talk about, you want to draw attention to, is not men's issues, not men's rights, but feminism. And if you eventually end up talking about men's rights or men's issues, it will be under the broad umbrella of talking about feminism. It will be a subcategory of talking about feminism. Talking about feminism largely consists of exposing feminism's wrongs, the wrong things that feminism does, and the wrongs that feminism inflicts not only upon men, but upon the world at large. Of course, a pretty big slice of that pie of the feminism's wrongs is, as we all know, wrongs inflicted upon men. So you will have ample scope to talk about wrongs done to men, which means, in many cases, depriving men of their rights in one form or another. So yeah, you do catch the subject of men's rights on the flip side, the subject of men's issues on the flip side. But the kind of group you should form should be focused on feminism, narrowly and politically as a topic. They're already making moves toward establishing men's issues groups. They're trying to get it going at Ryerson. They've already got it going at Simon Fraser in Vancouver. And there's a few other places where men's groups of one kind or another have sprang up on campus. The future I see for such organizations, such initiatives, when I look into my crystal ball, is they are going to be infiltrated or eventually somehow controlled or politically gelded by the feminists on their campus. The feminists are going to get in there one way or another and try to render those groups politically harmless and not a threat to feminism. Now, you'll notice the wording that people are using. They're saying men's issues. They're not saying men's rights, which is a politically loaded term. They're saying men's issues. Oh, we just want to discuss men's issues because, you know, men have issues, men have problems. And of course, nowadays, more and more feminists are willing to admit that, yes, men have issues, men have problems. And so they're just edging toward accepting the idea of men's issues groups on campus. But then they're going to swoop in there and try to take over and try to make these groups just another auxiliary of the feminist community. But I am glad to see these groups establishing themselves on campus because it means they've got a beachhead. Sure, they can be corrupted, they can be compromised politically, but the fact that the beachhead or bridgehead or whatever you want to call it is being established there, that's good. It means there is some degree of entree into that environment. The feminists will try to control them. Sometimes they will struggle against being controlled. There will be a struggle. The struggle has been taken onto enemy turf, the university campus. Now, what we're talking about today, the kind of group or presence that you are hopefully trying to establish on the university campus is non-feminist. And if we're honest, it's anti-feminist, or if you prefer counter-feminist. But you should bill yourself, bill yourself as non-feminist. Non-feminist is a less aggressive way of putting it than saying anti-feminist. Anti means you're going against somebody. You're attacking somebody. You're opposing somebody. Non simply means you are existing or coexisting, and you're just there. You're not going after them, but you're just existing. And that's the thing they can't handle. Because the ultimate aim of feminism, the whole system of feminist innovation, the perpetual revolution that is feminism, is to expand and to spread the influence of feminism, feminist power, the feminist innovation, feminist way of thinking, the feminist way of living, all of it, to spread it into every possible corner of life and every possible corner of the world, every possible theater of operation. It is to bring about the perfection of feminist hegemony, because of course feminism is to be thoroughly hegemonic. Now the question is, will it ever get there? Will it ever arrive at that pinnacle state? My answer is no, it will not, because due to its own internal contradictions and flaws, due to its inherent unsustainability, it will collapse before it ever reaches a supreme state of hegemonic feminism, which would of course be female supremacism. It's not going to get there because the situation is unsustainable, and the further it goes, the more it is going to destroy the very life system on which it depends in the first place. That is the mark of any cancer, well, the malignant kind anyway, and feminism is certainly the malignant kind of social cancer. It destroys, it ends up killing the host body, unless the host body rallies itself and does something to save itself. And that's what I'd like to see happen. So, on the university campus, you start a group, and your purpose, your initial action is nothing more than to announce your presence and say, we are not feminist. And you're sticking that idea in their face. You're shoving that idea in their face. We are not feminist. Remember, to them, every campus is a feminist community. Feminism rules the roost. And here comes somebody standing up and saying, hey, we're not feminist. Now, there's a lot of people on the university campus who are not feminist, who, if you talk to them privately, they would say, no, I'm not a feminist. And they might give various reasons for that. But yeah, there are non-feminist people on the university campus, but there is no non-feminist political identity. And what you're doing here is establishing a non-feminist political identity, putting non-feminism on the radar, making non-feminist, or rather non-feminism, a thing. Remember, non-feminism The world beyond feminism is everything, just like the third estate in France. It's everything. Under the feminist regime, it is nothing. Now it must become something. Okay? The non feminist sector is like the third estate in the French Revolution. It is, in fact, everything, and yet, in terms of power, it is nothing under the feminist regime. It has no awareness of itself, it has no political identity, it's not a thing with any kind of a collective will it can assert. It's just passive clay. It's flat ground ready to be paved with the feminist asphalt or rolled over with the feminist astroturf. Well, that's what's got to change. When I say that the non-feminist sector must become something, it must become a political something. Not being feminist is something you should take seriously. It's a political thing. It is a force that can be asserted or exerted in the world rather than just sitting there quietly. And naturally, the university campus is a good place to get this process rolling. Simply announcing yourself that you exist and that you're not feminist. It poses a challenge. The implicit question hanging in the air is we're here, we're not feminist. What do you plan to do about it? So you really don't have to do much. I mean, there's a lot you can do. You can have activities, you can have meetings, you can spread propaganda. You could do all of those things, but the mere act of establishing yourself and saying, hey, we're here, the mere act of doing just that is revolutionary. We are not feminists, we're here. Now, hey, you feminists over there, what are you going to do about it? Hello, we're here. We're the non-feminists. We're here. Get used to it. We're not going to go away. What are you going to do about it? Well, that puts them in kind of a bind, kind of a quandary. It's like, okay, these people haven't done anything. They haven't threatened anybody. They haven't said anything bad, or, we have nothing to charge them with. And yet there they are, and we can't just sit around here and let them walk around saying they're not feminist, because the people are getting interested. People are saying, well, now these people are not feminist. They're sending a message that it's okay to not be feminist, that not being feminist is another option in this world, that feminism effectively is no longer the only game in town. You can be a feminist or you can be not a feminist. Just introducing that radical idea can have revolutionary consequences. It's the foundation from which everything gradually builds itself up. You can do that. You can just say, we're here, we're not feminist, in effect. Now, that's just the beginning. Of course, you could do more than that. You could go out there and actively proselytize. You could actively propagandize. You could go out there and preach the gospel, so to speak. I mean, all of these possibilities are there for you if you want to explore them. But, well, okay. Let's see. They're not going to let you be an official campus group, so you can have unofficial meetings off campus. You can gather in a dorm room or wherever you live. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. You can advertise your presence on campus. You can stick notices to the cork board, to the kiosk. Maybe if there is an online equivalent of that, you can post a notice there. You can spread leaflets, flyers around your campus or near your campus. In the U district outside of your campus, there's all kinds of possibilities. So that's one way to make your presence known. Another thing I highly recommend doing is that you get yourself a website. Maybe a blog, maybe a regular website, whatever works best for you. But get yourself a website and start posting information. Put together some kind of a manifesto, some kind of a mission statement, or as I like to say, a bulkhead statement. That's your identity. This is where you get to tell the world what you are. Because if you don't tell the world what you are, if you leave it open like a blank check, then the world, meaning your enemies, the world is going to come in there and write something in that blank check. And God only knows what they might write. So it's important to establish your identity, or at least the basic framework of an identity, in the early stages. This has been the downfall of the quote unquote men's rights movement, going back years. The men's rights group, the men's rights movement is not really a thing. There is no such thing as the men's rights movement. There's just a bunch of people out there who are saying bad things about feminism. Some of them are saying bad things about women. They're saying various combinations of things about women or about feminism, or some combination thereof. They're not all alike. They're not a monolithic group. They're not a movement. And yet they have been painted as a movement. The name men's rights movement has been used and repeated over and over for a number of years, and now it's stuck. And it really just creates confusion. And all of that confusion, or most of it, or a lot of it anyway, could have been avoided if people had just written a simple manifesto, a simple bulkhead statement early on in the game, in the early stages. If they had done that, they would have nailed their colors to the mast. They would have made their identity clear. They would have been able to tell the world, well, we are this, we are this, we are not that, we are not that. But this thing just grew organically and chaotically, and it's gotten out of everybody's control, and it's now effectively, in the theater of propaganda anyway, is now effectively in the hands of our enemies. So now we, with the benefit of hindsight, we are trying to remedy some of that. So let's get back to your university campus and what you're doing there. So you're starting your non-feminist group, not a men's issues group, not an anti-feminist group, a non-feminist group. You have made your presence known, simply that you are such a group, that you are not feminist, and you're saying, hello, we're here. So now you've got a certain amount of attention. People are going to be looking and wondering and thinking, well, what are they going to do next? So you got your website. That's where things begin to get interesting. You can start putting stuff up on your website. You've got a number of people who are aware of this website. They're going there. And this is where you can begin to enter into the general campus conversation. You have inserted yourself into that. You've barged into that conversation. You weren't invited, but there you are. Then you can start holding meetings. You can start maybe delivering lectures. And as you grow more sophisticated, you can invite lecturers, all kinds of people. You can set up a venue, probably off campus, because there's no way in hell they're going to let you operate on campus. But that's one thing you can do. I don't want to limit what you do here. I'm just throwing out suggestions as fast as I think of them. And you might think of something better. But really, the mission here is to disestablish the feminist worldview. To disestablish the feminist worldview by simply establishing non-feminism, lack of feminism, as a political identity, as a something instead of a nothing. And you begin this process on the university campus, and from there it grows and spreads into the greater society. If it's happening on one campus, it could be happening on another campus. It could be happening on a whole chain of campuses. Eventually, you can begin to communicate with each other from campus to campus and begin to network yourselves and begin to build coordinated actions of one kind or another. But through all of this, what you're really doing is announcing the non-feminist presence of the world, establishing lack of feminism as a political identity. Now, of course, lack of feminism, non-feminism is such a broad umbrella, it naturally encompasses anti-feminism. If you're opposed to feminism, yeah, it's a pretty good bet you're not a feminist. If you are a men's rights advocate, well, you're probably not a feminist because, of course, it's impossible to truly look out for the best interests of men or work for the best interests of men if you are not on some level opposed to feminism. If you don't have an analysis that includes the role that feminism plays in the current, well, poisoning of men that's happening in society. The world is becoming a poisonous place to be male, and feminism has one hell of a lot to do with bringing that about. And if you don't have that fact in your analysis, you're not much of an anti-feminist. So eventually, all roads lead to Rome here. Sooner or later, you've got to deal with the fact that feminism has a lot to do with making the world a really nasty place in which to be male. But you take this one step at a time. In the beginning, just announcing that you're not feminist, that there is something beyond feminism, there is a world beyond feminism, that there is at least potentially another game in town which is not feminism. Just putting that up on everybody's mental horizon, establishing that thought, that radical concept as a Derridian vertical on everybody's mindscape. You do that, and boy, you got something. You're going to get some reaction out of people. They're going to come after your group, and they're going to throw every dirty trick in the book at you. They're going to lie about you. They're going to call you all kinds of bad names. They're going to call you a men's rights group, among other things, even though you don't claim to be a men's rights group. They're going to call you that. They're going to call you racist. They're going to call you homophobic. They're going to call you all kinds of crazy things based on no evidence at all. And they're going to look more and more crazy, more and more insane. So in a sense, what you're doing here is you are engineering drama. You're engineering a kind of theater on a grand scale. They're going to come after you, and when they do, you got to be ready for it, and you've got to keep records. Apply the principle of always be recording, whether that's electronically or whether that's in writing. Recording means keeping records. Always be keeping records. In time, you will find ways to signal boost this drama to make it known to broader and broader segments of the world. And that's something to look into. By all of this publicity, you will be attracting attention, and you will gain supporters and well-wishers, and you will gain receptive minds. You will gain an audience for your message. Then you will be in a position to plant ideas in the heads of all kinds of people. And those people will take the ideas that you've shared with them, and they will go out into the world and do interesting things with those ideas and further propagate ideas. We are propagating a cultural revolution here by spreading counter-feminist ideas, counter-feminist information into the cultural ambient. And we're doing it from the most effective venue at all, or of all, in my opinion, which is the university campus, the big societal mind factory. So, I haven't even scratched the surface here. I mean, this can go on and on, but remember, all you are trying to do is to disestablish the feminist worldview. And by bringing attention to the issues, By establishing a non-feminist political identity, you are effectively inserting a wedge into the middle of the feminist worldview and pounding, and in the end, splitting it apart. That's what you want to do. Just simply tell the world, anybody who cares to listen, that feminism is not mandatory. Feminism is not the only game in town. Feminism is strictly optional. You can choose to be a feminist or you can choose not to be a feminist. Now, if you're just not a feminist and you're very, very careful to walk that line of non-aggression, then you put the other side in a very delicate and very peculiar position. You put them in the position where they have only essentially two choices they can make. They can either back off and leave you the hell alone and leave you free to extend your influence and spread your message, or they can move against you in an aggressive manner. Those are the only two things they can do. But what's unique here and what's powerful and significant here is that if you do it right, you set them up in a position where it is impossible, but impossible for them to play the victim. And that is what feminism does par excellence. It plays the victim, it conflates itself with women, and then it forces women to play the victim, whether women want it or not. It creates women as a victim class in society. So if you're a woman and you buy into feminism, then you are buying into this scenario of woman as victim. Well, the counter-feminist revolutionary strategy here is to not let that happen, make it impossible for them to play the victim. Now, if you call yourself anti-feminist, well, then they've got some wiggle room to play their game. If you simply quietly say, I'm not a feminist, it's not so easy, is it? This simple principle is powerful. It's like splitting the atom. It's that powerful. So set them up in a situation, a crafted moral dilemma where it is impossible for them to play the victim, where they can either leave you alone or make an aggressor move against you. And if they make an aggressor move against you, they can't play the victim, then it will be apparent to everybody that they are the bully. That is the situation you want to get the feminist establishment into. First, within the crucible of your university campus, and from there spilling over into the world at large, into ever widening circles. Have I said enough yet? Have I given you all enough food for thought? Have I given you enough material that you can take what I've said and go out there and build upon it? Have I jump-started anybody's mind with what I've said so far? Well, I think I've just about talked myself out here. And it would be nice if we had a telephone here where people could call in and I could talk directly with listeners. Unfortunately, we haven't got that, which is sad. But anyway, we do the best with what we got. So this is how we attack the enemy citadel. This is how we put the enemy citadel under siege. Except maybe siege is not quite the right word, because in fact we have breached the citadel and we're inside, at least in the scenario that I'm talking about here. And remember, this is just one form of on-the-ground action, counter-feminist action that you can perform out in the world. The university campus is just one venue, one of many, but I'm featuring it here because it is such a powerful and significant venue. It's one you definitely want to look into because the university is the site of radical social change in our civilization, let's face it. So that's where you want to operate. So I guess that's all I've got to say. I feel like I am squeezed dry. That's all I've got to say about that for now. Thank you for listening. Let's move right along with the program. As is the custom, we've got some links leading to various articles on the internet that we can sit here and read and talk about. So I'm going to look into some of these. Earlier, I told you to go ahead and be sure and look into Cora Newbold's Cafe Press web store and look at all that cool non-feminist merchandise you can get there. Get your own non-feminist coffee mug, get your own non-feminist t-shirt, your own non-feminist key fob, your non-feminist bumper sticker. Well, the non-feminist bumper sticker, maybe that's not the best idea. You could come back and find some damage to your car if you've been away for a couple of hours. Especially if you are in one of those campus scenarios that we've been talking about, boy, then you really got to look out for your car. I tell you, feminists can be dangerous wild animals if you push them to the wall. It's the same with any worldview. Any worldview fighting for its life, any worldview under threat could be a very nasty animal. Anyway, then we talked about CAFE, the Canadian Association for Equality. They're going to go after the police who arrest innocent men and ignore innocent men who are being physically abused. They're going to go after that. I look forward to seeing how that plays out. Now, where is that list of links? Here we are. Speaking of the university campus, here is an article from Forbes.com called The Disappearing College Mail. And I'm going to pop that into my browser so I can read it and we can talk about it. Pardon me, folks, while I get set up here. My browser is not being very cooperative at the moment. Oh, what is this? Continue to cite. Yeah, they're throwing up a bunch of rigmarole at me here. Pop-ups and so on. Okay, here we go. The Disappearing College Mail from Forbes.com. That's the name of the article. This is from May of this year. It's a little bit old, but it's an interesting story. The College for All crowd laments that too few Americans are getting university diplomas. They also lament that some qualified minority and first-generation college students are undermatched. They do not go to the best schools available for them. But little attention is given to the quantitatively vastly more important reason why the proportion of Americans with degrees is not growing faster: the substantial underrepresentation of men on college campuses. For every 4 women graduating from 4-year colleges, there are only 3 men. If males graduated from college in the same proportion as women, there would be about 14% more college graduates each year, over 2 million more over a decade. An under-discussed issue is, why aren't men going and graduating from college as much as women? Okay, well, that's an interesting question. I'm not going to try to answer it here. Some would say because the university campus has become hostile to men, so men are staying away. Now, that's one possibility, but I'm not going to go into that here. Just going to go on with the article. Before getting into that, I want to make it crystal clear that I do not subscribe to the view that increasing college attendance and graduation would be a positive development. Indeed, I think too many people graduate from college, and that at the margin, the return on college training is now pretty low for a lot of prospective college students in America. Yes, that is true. If anything, the problem is closer to too many women graduate from college rather than too few men get college degrees. But why the gender differences? My favorite, decidedly left-wing advocate for colleges, Tom Mortensen, offers a partial answer in the January 2015 issue of Post-Secondary Education Opportunity. Bad things happen to teenage males far more than to teenage females. Relative to women, for example, young 15 to 24-year-old males are over 4 times as likely to commit suicide, 9 times as likely to be murdered, and for those under 18, about 25 times as likely to be imprisoned. They are also less religious, but far more violent. And here there is a table showing statistics broken down into males and subgroups of males, such as all whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians. Browser problems again. Okay. Source: National Center for Education Studies, authors' calculations. The table provides some more detail. Before 1980, males were a majority easily on the college campuses. The numbers for, say, 1960 would show even greater male dominance. The phenomenon of the disappearing male began in earnest in the 1970s and 1980s. In the post-1990 decline has been more modest. Indeed, the gender balance seems to have been relatively stable since the late 1990s. While the decline in the male role on campus is notable among all racial groups, it is especially startling among blacks, where women graduates outnumber men nearly 2 to 1. In percentage terms, however, the decline among Hispanics is even more pronounced. The increased violence of male teenagers and young adults noted above is symptomatic of a much broader problem: the decline in the traditional two-parent family, and associated with that, the sharp decline among males of their traditional adult roles in society, providing income for their spouses and children. This is particularly true among racial minorities. A colleague of mine once perceptively said, "The black family survived the Civil War, Reconstruction, Jim Crow laws, and lynching, but could not survive the Great Society." Males in particular have been neutered by the entitlement society and the welfare state, groups which have the most contact with the welfare state, especially through various public assistance policies, such as racial minorities, have seen the greatest amount of male neutering, and thus the greatest decline in university graduation rates. The government, not males, provide incomes for many single-parent families. It is the females who bear children who have historically drawn welfare benefits. So what do the young men do? They are often frustrated, angry, and violent. The decline in the primary male economic function, working, is large. In 19, almost 79% of men over the age of 18 worked. Half a century later, that proportion had fallen 15 percent points to under 64%. By contrast, among women, the employment population ratio rose more than 18 percent points. 3/4 of the difference in working between the sexes had disappeared. While demographic changes and a revolution in thinking about women's role in society are important, the work is associated with public assistance and related to welfare state measures, expanding disability programs, and extended unemployment insurance benefits, for example, contribute.
Hey, Fetal Bogan.
Yes.
You're getting a little bit of an echo.
I am.
Up. Sorry to disrupt you. And right there.
Well, if it's too bad, we could just wrap the show up.
Oh, well, whatever you did sounds a little better there.
I backed away from the computer a little bit. That's
Yep,
what I'm
that
going to do.
that did it.
Okay. Well, carry on here. Among blacks, the problem was even more pronounced. In 1960, a greater proportion of developed blacks worked than whites. By 2010, 59% of whites worked compared with 52% of blacks. As the centrality of work among males declined, so apparently has their ardor to go to college. Why bother? Why do well in high school? Viewed increasingly negatively by society, men have engaged in increasingly violent antisocial behavior, manifested in more of them rioting, taking drugs, and ending up in prison. Society urges women to study the STEM disciplines, but not men. My university has a Women in Science initiative, but not a Men in Science one. And the link says continue. So now the browser has to reload. And as I recall, there's about one paragraph left in this article. Here we go. The disappearing college male continued from page 1. Uttering these facts is politically incorrect. It might be considered anti-women, but the College for All crowd really wants to promote its message. It needs to recognize that it is especially men who are turning their backs on college. Very good. That's the end of the article. So, Forbes, which is a major media outlet, if ever there was, is recognizing the problem. Okay. It's saying that men are being badly treated, that men are suffering. They're closing the empathy gap here, I must say. Good on Forbes. Good on Forbes. They're closing the empathy gap. Now, of course, if I were a feminist, I would say that all of this male behavior is simply symptomatic of the patriarchy, and it's men who need to clean up their act. Men must be taught not to rape. Men must be taught not to take drugs. Men must be taught not to riot, not to be violent, and so on. Which, of course, that mentality, would simply make the problem worse and worse and worse. So, feminism, which we could define in so many ways, could be defined as the mental attitude that men are the problem. Find me a feminist who doesn't think that men are the problem. That's a rare feminist. In fact, that's a non-feminist. If you're to be a feminist at all, on some level of your mind, on some level of your internally consistent logic, you have to be invested in the belief that men are the problem. That whatever's wrong with the world can be traced to a male source, and that therefore all of men's problems, men's pains, men's sufferings in this life are in some sense their own damn fault, because it all flows from a male source to begin with. That's feminism. So, interesting thing about feminism is that, well, they don't acknowledge the role that feminism plays in making these things happen. The bad things are happening to men and ultimately to everybody. But they fail to see how all of these things simply undermine and negate the feminist narrative that women are oppressed. You pile up enough evidence that men have it bad, that maybe men are oppressed, maybe even structurally oppressed by institutions, the more you pile that up, under the weight of that, the feminist narrative is going to collapse eventually. It's going to crack under the strain and come down in a smoking heap of rubble. You can attack feminism as an ideology which is actively hostile to men, or you can take the other approach where you can demonstrate that the feminist narrative is wrong, and you can pile up evidence that it's wrong. So there's two ways of going at it. And I like this Forbes article here because it gives us a good dose of the latter, especially toward the end of the article here, saying that, yeah, men have problems. And if we want to fix problems, we've got to fix men's problems. And it doesn't blame men, either for the problems of the world or for the problems of men. So good on Forbes. And if I sound like a men's rights advocate in saying all of this, no, I'm saying all of this because it is a universal concern to humans everywhere, because, you know, this is going to impact all of us. If it's bad for half the human race, it's bad for all of the human race. You cannot separate male well-being from female well-being. In the long run, we need to take a more level, humanistic approach to the human situation. I think there is no other way. Feminism has got to go. Bad stuff, poison, cancer, bad feminism, no more feminism, it's got to go. I am a non-feminist. I am not a part of feminism. I do not support feminism. Obviously, I'm not a feminist. I am a non-feminist. And nothing in my world, nothing in my life, nothing in my existence, nothing in my action, or if you will, nothing in my karma will support feminism or the feminist power structure or feminist innovation on any level. So, non-feminist men and women everywhere, I salute you. You can be anti-feminist, you can go after feminism aggressively, or you can just stand back and refuse to be part of feminism, and eventually feminism will implode, because it will run up against your refusal to support feminism as if against a stone wall. If you are a steadfast and persistent and unwavering non-feminist, in the long view of things, in the wider scheme of things, you're just the same, just as good as an anti-feminist, but you have that little extra edge, because the feminists cannot play their victim game against you. What else have we got on tap tonight to talk about, or should I wrap up the episode? Oh, Ryerson Student Union, they're trying to start a men's issues awareness society at Ryerson. And there was a hilarious article here about fart rape. Does anybody know about fart rape? Well, if you don't know about fart rape, I don't blame you. It's not exactly a fascinating subject that's good for comedy. You know what? I think we're going to wrap up episode number 73 of the Vanguard Report. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Everybody, remember, feminism is what we say it is. We are reclaiming the language. And the first step to reclaiming the language is to reclaim the definition of the word feminism and the description, the phenomenological description of feminism as a thing in the world. Feminism is what we say it is. That's the non-feminist revolution in a nutshell. The non-feminist sector is becoming something, a political identity, a force in the political algebra. Feminism is what we say it is. That is how we grab hold of power. Folks, episode number 73 has been great. Next week, it will be episode number 74 of the Vanguard Report. I have no idea what that episode is going to be about, but come back in a week for episode number 74 of the Vanguard Report. Remember, never forget, feminism is what we say it is. And be excellent to each other. And I'll see you next week. Ciao.